Hey guys, what is up? Today I wanted to make a video about optimization in Sorti. So this is a large open world map, and hopefully you guys can see my FPS display at the top left. It shows GPU, CPU, and frames per second. So I started with kind of everything, cranked up settings-wise, and in a big area where we can, look a very long ways. And you can see I'm pretty much holding steady right at 60. This is uncapped, and I am on a 4070 card and a 5700 AMD CPU. So, decent hardware, but a few years old. So I wanted to talk a little bit about UE5 gets a lot of a bad rep for optimization. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why some of that is. So you see I'm at Epic here. I have DLAA on. So this means no DLSS at all, just the anti-aliasing. And then I'm at 2K. So this is basically native 2K. Ray tracing's on, Lumen's on, Nanite's on, tessellation's on. All the expensive stuff is on. We're on Epic. And so this is kind of, the most expensive the game can look. And a lot of games, take these kind of stock UE5 settings, and then the only thing they might let you change would be to go to low. And you can see that that does make a difference here. I removed the ground, the fancy ground rocks, which is a lot of that. But that only gets us up to 90 FPS, and I'm on pretty medium high hardware. And you can do a whole lot more. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put things back on Epic and show how some of these other settings actually matter more than the kind of overall quality settings that we met. I'm going to move away from the NPCs real quick. We'll run over to that cave there because I also want to show how some of this is affected by indoor versus outdoor lighting and stuff like that. So we'll sprint on over to our cave, kill the guy who's guarding it, and then I will start fiddling with optimization settings. And I think, the TLDR for this is that a lot of the settings around Nanite, ray tracing, tessellation, those are actually going to matter more than some of the overall quality settings. And if you give users the ability to tweak those things, you can very much have a UE5 game that runs at 200 FPS on my hardware and 60 FPS on much older hardware, while still being able to offer a pretty nice visual quality for people who want things to look pretty. So let's see. I'm going to start with looking at Lumen and ray tracing, because those are two of the main expensive things. Kind of the big thing in UE5 is Nanite and Lumen. So first we'll mess with Lumen, and then I'll just turn off ray tracing alongside it. Turning ray tracing off is fast. Turning it back on takes quite a while. So you can see for the outdoor lighting, turning those two things off actually doesn't look that different. And my FPS jumped from 60 to 90. And for all these FPS values, I'm running OBS right now. I'm recording, so they're probably 20 to 25% higher when I'm not doing that. So just keep that in mind. So just turning those two things off for outdoor, I don't think it matters at all. For indoor, it actually matters quite a bit. So we'll go ahead and see that. You just look at how reflective the light off the stairs is, and how varied the lighting is between the lit areas and the shadowy areas. With Lumen and ray tracing off, everything's kind of a little flat color-wise and a little washed out. If I turn them back on, and again for ray tracing, turning it on takes 20 seconds or something. It's pretty annoying. So that's part of why a lot of games don't let you toggle some of this stuff. But we're patient. We'll wait for it. This is going to knock my FPS back down from 90 to 60 right away. But while for the outdoor lighting, the change in visual quality was negligible, for the indoor lighting is going to be very noticeable. So you can see now, wait for it, my FPS isn't actually 13. It just has to reload all the shaders. And we'll be back up around 60 probably. Wait for it. All right, that's what we're getting. So you can see now the dark parts of the cave are much darker. The bright parts are brighter. We get these, really nice reflections off the kind of wet stairs. It feels much more like a gloomy cave. So for outdoor areas, there was almost no visual difference, but for indoor ones, there really is, and we can see that that 30 FPS kind of comes, you get something for it. But anyway, that is kind of setting one. Then there's also Nanite and tessellation. Nanite is tricky. Nanite gets a bit of a bad rep, but for anything with a lot of meshes, it's actually going to help you, and it's got a flat cost when there's no meshes on display. No. When there's no meshes on display, the cost is kind of, not worth paying. When the scene is very busy, it's going to be a win. But tessellation is different, and tessellation requires Nanite, but they're separate and they can be turned off and on. So what tessellation does is you can see the ground here. You can see those rocks have that little stone there right under my cursor has like a 3D appearance. But this is actually a flat texture. It's just a totally flat floor with a texture, and then Nanite uses that texture with tessellation to generate a height map and give those real geometry, so they look 3D even though they're not. And if I turn off tessellation, those get flattened out. But that tessellation effect is quite expensive, so we're going to get a pretty good little FPS boost just from turning off tessellation. You can see now we're up to kind of 110, but that rock now looks, depending on the angle, it can look kind of unnaturally flat or it can look okay. It's not going to cast a shadow with Nanite tessellation. You actually get little tiny shadows from those rocks. But that's just another little setting. So you can see at this point, I've done nothing with my resolution. I've done nothing with turning off epic. I'm still just on DLAA, so no upscaling. But we went from 60 FPS to about 100. And a lot of games, only give you kind of minimal settings like that overall quality slider. And that doesn't really give you the fine-grained control to decide how optimized versus how pretty you want your UE5 to be. So let's go back up and look at these changes outside. You can see the outside environment, again, is fairly robust to the visual changes. That's partly just the ground texture I use here. It's already fairly flat, so having this guy's farming me. Having Nanite tessellation off doesn't matter much because it wasn't being tessellated very much before. But yeah, so there we go. So both inside and outside, turning that tessellation off gets us up to somewhere in the kind of 90 to 110 FPS range. Again, that's with OBS running. Without it, you'd be probably more like 125, something like that. So now let's actually start messing with some of the more standard stuff that we would get. So what if we move from DLAA to quality? So we have a little bit of upscaling. That makes a big difference right away. DLSS is so good these days. I can't tell the difference between quality and DLAA at all. If you turn it down to fastest, you can definitely notice it. There are certain textures where it's going to be more visible than others. So the most DLSS unfriendly one that I have is this one here. And you can see if I move my head rapidly, it gets a little sparkly with DLSS on. Whereas with DLA, it doesn't sparkle. But that's a pretty small price to pay for 30% more frames. So I think I put DLSS quality to the default for Sword Eye so people could experience that. And obviously, you can knock DLSS down to fastest and you'd be getting more like 150 probably. I'll kill these guys real quick and we can go over to an area with more rocks. Okay, so I was just going to go up a little higher so that we can have more stuff in our view. So I'd mentioned Nanite before, so we're sitting at 120 some right now. If we go ahead and turn Nanite off, you can see our FPS actually went down, not up, because this is a fairly busy scene. So the benefit we're getting from Nanite exceeds the kind of flat cost of running it. If I like really limit my vision so I can't see anything, then having Nanite off really helps me. But as soon as there's a lot of meshes in view, it hurts me. And so having Nanite off gives these really uneven frame jumps. When I have it on, wait for it to stabilize, we'll be at about 120-ish. So it's 120-ish looking over there. And it's, 140, 150 looking here. But it's not like the 180 I was getting with it off. And, before it was like jumping from like 170 down to like 100 over here. That the magnitude of that jump is cut by in half, kind of having Nanite off. Or having Nanite on cuts the jump in half. And I'd much rather not have those big FPS changes, so I always keep Nanite on and would look to gain my frames in other ways. So, I guess we should try real quick just to see what does DLSS on fastest look like. Visually out here, again, it doesn't change much. You can see in combat. You can see some of the the particle effects, the sparks that he's giving off are like a little floatier, a little less well defined. Ow. Jesus, I'm getting farmed. Trying to make a video. Alright. But yeah, DLSS is just really good these days. I feel like fastest isn't actually that bad in a lot of cases. And then, of course, we can start messing with the standard, settings. So we're sitting at, wait for it. We're sitting at about 150 to 160, somewhere in there, depending on where we're looking. So we just put everything down to low. That gets us, more FPS, not a ton more, because we're CPU bound at this point, especially there'll be S running, but you can see my GPU percentage is down to 70. It looks like this keeps us up around 190. And then obviously if I really wanted to do more, I'd start dropping my screen resolution off of 2K. But no need to do that. I think that gets the point across. So the one question I've had a few people ask me is why don't more games give you this level of customization of your graphics settings? And I'll hop into our cave here and show you the reason. Let's go real quick. Or, my opinion, the reason I don't actually know what people are thinking. That guy might kill us. Okay, so let's go down to the cave, and you can already see on low, the shadows just aren't great, so it just looks kind of flat, and this particular texture doesn't work at all on low. I should probably just hide that when people are in low settings. Everything just looks a little bland, and nowadays, a huge part of video game marketing and stuff is streamers. So for AAA games where they're very focused on just their marketing, you don't really want people streaming this version of the game. You want them streaming the prettiest version of the game they can, and they're only going to be streaming at 60 FPS generally anyway. Not many people are going to have the internet to stream at 200 FPS or something. So let's wait the 20 seconds for ray tracing to turn back off. But if you don't let them tweak things like ray tracing, Lumen, and tessellation, then you kind of limit the extent to which people might play your game at a visual quality that's not as appealing for potential buyers. And so, my hunch as to why most games don't actually let you toggle some of this stuff is that if I only let you change DLSS and overall quality, this is kind of the worst you can make the game look, and that people would prefer that there's no way to make it look too bad. Unfortunately, what that means is that for some people who would really enjoy playing at 200 FPS, or this is a big map. If you play in a small map, you can hold 300 FPS with my hardware and 360 with modern hardware. Those people are kind of just left with no option because they can't actually tweak the game without editing INI files or starting to do more crazy stuff. So yeah, that's my hunch. Hopefully this is helpful for anyone who's been curious about UE5 optimization, because I feel like there's a lot of kind of inaccurate discourse of people just hating on UE5 games or thinking like you can't possibly make a well optimized game in the engine. And you can run something that looks about like this does on you can run Sword Eye on like a 1060, 1070 and get a stable 60 FPS. It's definitely possible. You just have to be willing to turn down some of the visual quality options to make that happen. So I'll crank it back up just once more so we can see kind of what the lighting difference is and what that feels like, and wrap the video up there. Thanks for watching.